I was standing in my kitchen in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, peeling potatoes for dinner, when my brother-in-law Derek walked into my house without knocking and told me I had 30 days to pack my things and get out. Not asked, told. The potato peeler froze in my hand, a long curl of skin dangling over the sink. "Excuse me?" I said, turning to face him. Derek stood there in his expensive North Face jacket, the one that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, holding a rolled-up stack of papers like a weapon. His wife, Felicia, hovered behind him in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face arranged into something that was supposed to look apologetic, but came off as smug. "The farm's been sold, Margot," Derek said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've already signed the papers. The new owners take possession in 30 days. Let me back up. My name is Margot Chen, and I'm 53 years old. I'm a part-time librarian at the Glenwood Springs branch, and for the past 27 years, I lived on a 60-acre apple farm with my husband, James Holloway. James died 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, 61 days from diagnosis to funeral. The kind of loss that doesn't just break you, it hollows you out and leaves you wandering through your own life like a stranger. James and I didn't have children. We had the farm instead, rows and rows of Honeycrisp and Granny Smith trees that bloomed white and pink every spring and smelled like honey on warm afternoons. We had our farmhouse with the crooked porch swing. We had our life. After James died, I kept working at the library 3 days a week. It was something to do, somewhere to be that wasn't drowning in memories. The farm mostly sat dormant. I couldn't manage the harvest alone, and I couldn't bring myself to hire anyone. It felt like a betrayal somehow, like replacing James. I knew it wasn't sustainable. I knew I'd have to make decisions eventually. I just didn't know James's family would make them for me. Derek was James's younger brother by 6 years. He worked in real estate development in Denver, the kind of guy who talked about maximizing asset potential at Thanksgiving dinner. Felicia was his second wife, 20 years younger than him, with veneers so white they looked blue in certain light, and a habit of starting sentences with, "No offense, but they'd never liked me much." I think Derek expected James to marry someone from an old Colorado family, someone with connections and money. Instead, James met me at a farmer's market in 1996 when I was selling handmade bookmarks to pay off my student loans. I was the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants who ran a dry cleaning business in Aurora. My parents spoke English with heavy accents and worked 70-hour weeks. Not exactly the pedigree Derek had in mind. Still, James loved his brother. He really did. And Derek had been genuinely devastated at the funeral, crying so hard he couldn't finish his eulogy. So when Derek started calling more often after James died, checking in on me, I thought it was grief bringing us together. I actually thought he cared. "You can't sell the farm," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "It's not yours to sell." Derek unrolled his papers on my kitchen table, smoothing them flat with theatrical precision. "Actually, Margot, it is. James and I inherited this property jointly from our father in 2004. It's been in the Holloway family for 3 generations. He tapped a document with his index finger. See? Joint tenancy, which means when James died, his share automatically transferred to me. My stomach dropped. I looked at the papers, official county documents, property records, and there, in black and white, both names, James Robert Holloway and Derek Allen Holloway. "That can't be right," I whispered. "I know this is hard," Felicia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But Derek's been paying the property taxes for over a year now. We've been more than patient." That part was true. After James died, the bills had overwhelmed me. Derek had offered to take care of the property taxes temporarily, and I'd let him because I could barely get out of bed some days, let alone navigate county tax systems. "We got an incredible offer," Derek continued. "Developer wants to put in a boutique resort. You know how this area is blowing up. We're talking $1.2 million, Margot." He said the number like it should excite me. "We?" I repeated. "Well, it's my property," Derek said. "But I'm not heartless. I'll give you $50,000 to help you relocate. That's more than generous considering you have no legal claim. $50,000 out of $1.2 million for the home I'd lived in for 27 years. They left 20 minutes later, Derek's papers still spread across my kitchen table. like evidence at a crime scene. I sat down hard in one of the chairs James had built by hand, oak with carved armrests, and tried to breathe. My hands were shaking. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming, the old clock ticking above the stove, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I looked around the kitchen, at the curtains I'd sewn, the herbs growing in mismatched pots on the windowsill, the photograph of James and me on our wedding day stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like an apple. 30 days. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew who might understand legal documents better than me. My friend Yuki had been my supervisor at the library for 15 years before she retired and went to law school at 58, just because she felt like it. She'd passed the bar 2 years ago and now did estate law part-time, mostly helping elderly clients with wills. "Margot?" she answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" "I need help," I said, and my voice cracked on the second word. Yuki came over that evening with a bottle of wine and her reading glasses. She sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours, going through every document Derek had left, pulling up county records on her laptop, making notes in her precise handwriting. "Okay," she finally said. "Here's the situation. The property was jointly owned by James and Derek. Their father's will specified joint tenancy with right of survivorship." My heart sank further. "But," Yuki continued, holding up one finger, "there's something interesting here. In 2009, there was a quitclaim deed filed. Do you remember anything about that?" I searched my memory. 2009. That was the year we almost lost everything during the recession, the year we took out a second mortgage to keep the farm running. "We refinanced," I said slowly. "The bank required—" I don't remember exactly. There was so much paperwork. Yuki turned her laptop toward me. "This quitclaim deed shows Derek transferring his entire interest in the property to James, sole ownership, filed with the county in March 2009. I stared at the screen. "Which means," Yuki said, "if this document is valid, James was the sole owner when he died, which means the property would have passed according to his will, not by right of survivorship." "James had a will," I said, my heart suddenly pounding. "We both did. We made them in 2010, right after we refinanced everything." "Do you have a copy?" I did. It took me 20 minutes to find it in James's filing cabinet in the office, the small room off the kitchen where he used to do the farm's bookkeeping. Everything was still exactly as he'd left it. I hadn't been able to bring myself to move anything. The will was in a manila folder labeled "Important Docs" in James's blocky handwriting. Yuki read it carefully, then read it again. Then she looked up at me with something fierce and bright in her eyes. "Margot, this will leave everything to you. The house, the land, all assets, everything." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Derek's face in my kitchen, the casual cruelty of it, the way he'd walked in without knocking like he already owned the place, the way Felicia had looked at my furniture like she was calculating what would fit in a donation truck. $50,000. Like I was a problem to be solved, a squatter to be evicted with a settlement. But I also kept thinking about James. James, who'd loved his brother despite everything, who'd called Derek every Sunday, who'd cried when Derek's first marriage fell apart. Would James want me to fight this? I got up at 3 in the morning and went outside in my bathrobe. The April air was cold and sharp, smelling like pine and damp earth. The apple trees were just starting to bud, tiny green promises along every branch. I walked through the rows, my bare feet soaking in the wet grass, and let myself remember. James teaching me to prune. The summer we got married under these trees. The morning he told me he was sick, standing right here trying to be brave. This wasn't just property. This was my life. Yuki made calls the next morning. She contacted Derek's real estate attorney, a sharp-voiced woman named Patricia, who sounded annoyed to be dealing with complications. She explained the situation, the quitclaim deed from 2009, James's will, my legal status as sole heir. There was a very long pause on the other end of the line. Then Patricia said she'd need to review the documents and get back to us. Derek called me 2 hours later, furious. "What the hell are you doing, Margot?" "Protecting my home," I said. "That quitclaim deed was a technicality for the refinancing." His voice was loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Dad wanted us to inherit together. That was always the plan." Then why did you sign it over to James? Silence. The bank required it, he finally said. They wouldn't approve the loan with two owners. It was supposed to be temporary. But it wasn't temporary, I said quietly. It's been 14 years, Derek. And James made a will after that, leaving everything to me. You're really going to do this? You're going to screw me over? Something hot flashed through my chest. I'm screwing you over? My voice rose. You tried to sell my house out from under me. You gave me 30 days, Derek, $50,000 like I'm some kind of charity case. I've been paying the goddamn taxes. Send me a bill, I said and hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. The next week was ugly. Derek's lawyers sent threatening letters. They claimed the quitclaim deed was fraudulent, that I'd manipulated James, that I was taking advantage of a grieving family. They demanded mediation. Yuki, bless her, sent back responses that were professional and absolutely devastating. She cited case law, she referenced Colorado statute. She very politely suggested that if Derek wanted to dispute a 14-year-old county-recorded deed and a properly executed will, he was welcome to do so in court, where discovery would be very thorough and very public. The letters stopped after that. But Derek started calling other family members. James's cousin Brenda called me awkward and apologetic. Margot, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but Derek says you're trying to steal the family farm. His Aunt Lorraine left me a voicemail saying she was disappointed in me for causing drama during a time of grief. Even James's best friend from college, a guy named Tim, who I'd always liked, sent me a careful text asking if we could talk things through. It was isolating in a way I hadn't expected. These were people who'd been at James's funeral, who'd hugged me and told me I was family. Now they were looking at me like I was the villain. The one person who didn't waver was my mother. She drove up from Aurora on a Saturday morning, let herself in with the key I'd given her years ago, and found me crying at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents. Mau Mau, she said, using her old nickname for me. Little cat. What is this? I told her everything. My mother listened in silence, her face unreadable. Then she started making tea, moving through my kitchen with practiced efficiency, filling the kettle, getting down the good cups. When she finally sat down across from me, she pushed a cup of jasmine tea into my hands. Your father and I, we work 40 years at the dry cleaning, she said in her accented English. 40 years. You know how many times someone tries to cheat us? Tell us we don't understand American business, American law? I shook my head. Too many times, she said. And you know what we learn? Paper is paper. Law is law. If they want to take from you, they have to prove you have no right. She tapped the table firmly. Can they prove? No, I whispered. Then you fight. Not for money, for respect. Her eyes, sharp and dark behind her glasses, held mine. James loved you. He left you this place. You think you honor his memory by letting his brother bully you? When she put it like that, the answer was obvious. The turning point came 3 weeks after Derek's first visit. Yuki got a call from Patricia, Derek's attorney. They wanted to settle. We met at a lawyer's office in Glenwood Springs, a neutral location with a conference table that smelled like lemon polish and old coffee. Derek looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and his expensive jacket hung loose on his shoulders. Felicia wasn't with him. Patricia did most of the talking. My client is prepared to acknowledge Mrs. Chen's ownership claim, she said crisply. In exchange, we'd like to propose a settlement that recognizes the Holloway family's historical connection to the property. Yuki raised an eyebrow. Go on. Mr. Holloway will waive all ownership claims. In return, Mrs. Chen will reimburse the property taxes he's paid over the past 14 months, approximately $18,000, and will grant the family access to the property cemetery. I blinked. The what? Patricia looked uncomfortable. There's a small family cemetery on the northwest corner of the property. 4 graves, the brothers' parents, grandparents. I'd known there were old graves out there. James had maintained the area, kept the headstones clean. I'd never thought about the legal implications. The family would like assurance they can visit, and eventually, well, there's one remaining plot. Understanding hit me like cold water. James. Derek wanted to make sure James could be buried there. I looked at Derek directly for the first time since we'd sat down. He was staring at his hands, his jaw tight. Is that what this is about? I asked quietly. The cemetery? He didn't answer for a long moment. Dad always said we'd all be buried there, he finally said, his voice rough. 4 generations of Holloways. When James died, you cremated him. His ashes are scattered on the property, but there's no marker, no grave. I thought... He stopped, swallowed. I thought if I owned the land, I could make sure he was remembered properly. Something twisted in my chest. You could have just asked me, Derek. Would you have said yes? He looked up, and his eyes were red. You made it pretty clear you didn't want the family around. You wouldn't return calls. You changed the locks. You told me I was doing it wrong. The words burst out of me before I could stop them. At the funeral, Felicia said I should have done a church service instead of the Orchard Memorial. You said I shouldn't have cremated him, that it wasn't what the family would have wanted. You made me feel like every decision I made was wrong. Derek stared at me. I was grieving my brother, he said, and I was grieving my husband. The room went silent. Patricia and Yuki exchanged glances. I took a shaky breath. I didn't change the locks to keep you out. I changed them because people kept walking into my house unannounced, and it made me feel like I wasn't safe anywhere. And I didn't scatter all of James's ashes. I kept some. I wasn't ready to let go completely. Derek's face crumpled slightly. I didn't know, he whispered. How could you? I said. And I was surprised by how tired I sounded. We barely spoke for months. Then you showed up and told me I had 30 days to leave. You didn't ask what I wanted. You didn't ask what James would have wanted. You just decided. He looked down again. The developer offered $1.2 million, he said. I have 3 kids in private school. Felicia's lifestyle is expensive. And I thought you'd be relieved, honestly. You're alone here. The farm's too much for one person. I thought I was helping. By giving me $50,000? That's more than you contributed financially over the years. The words landed like a slap. Yuki started to interject, but I held up my hand. You're right, I said, and Derek's head jerked up in surprise. I didn't buy this land. I didn't inherit it. Financially, my contribution was minimal. I leaned forward. But I lived here, Derek. I worked this farm for 27 years. I picked apples until my hands bled. I learned to drive a tractor. I spent every anniversary, every birthday, every quiet morning here with James. This isn't an asset to me, it's my life. Derek was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? He finally asked. I'd been thinking about this for weeks. I want you to acknowledge that the property is mine. Legally, completely, no conditions. He nodded slowly. I'll pay you back for the property taxes, plus interest. Another nod. And I'll give you the cemetery plot. Not just access, I'll deed that section to you. 1 acre, including the existing graves and the empty plot. You can bury James there if you want. I'll even help you design a headstone. Derek's eyes widened. But, I continued, I keep the rest of the farm, and if I ever decide to sell, I'll give you right of first refusal at fair market value. Not a gift, not a family discount, but the option to buy it before I list it publicly. Patricia was scribbling notes furiously. Yuki was trying not to smile. Derek looked at me like he'd never seen me before. Why would you give me the cemetery plot? He asked. Because James loved you, I said simply. And because you're right, he should be remembered properly. I've been selfish, keeping his ashes to myself. He belongs with his family too. Something in Derek's face shifted. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice cracked. Margot, I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking about you at all. I was angry that he was gone, and I took it out on you. I nodded, my throat tight. I'm sorry too, I said. I shut you out when you were hurting. That wasn't fair either. We signed the settlement papers 2 weeks later. Derek transferred all claims to the property to me. I deeded him the cemetery acre and wrote him a check for the back taxes, $21,000 including interest, which wiped out a good chunk of my savings, but it was worth it. The developer's deal fell through, which apparently caused a huge fight between Derek and Felicia. I heard through the family grapevine that they were in marriage counseling. I tried not to feel too satisfied about that. Derek and I met at the cemetery plot on a warm Saturday in May. The apple trees were in full bloom, and the air smelled like honey and grass. I brought James's remaining ashes in a simple wooden box. Derek brought a design for the headstone, elegant, understated, with James's dates and a quote from his favorite Robert Frost poem. I thought we could plant something, Derek said, around the grave, something that blooms. Apple tree, I said immediately. A Honeycrisp. Derek smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen from him in over a year. Yeah, that's perfect. We buried the ashes together, digging in the rocky soil, not talking much. It was hard physical work, and when we were done, we were both sweating and dirty. Derek sat back on his heels, looking at the small plot we'd prepared. He really loved you, you know, he said quietly. I was jealous of it sometimes, the way he looked at you. My eyes burned. He loved you too. He wanted you two to be closer. I know. Derek wiped his face, leaving a streak of dirt across his cheek. I wasted a lot of time being petty about stupid stuff, and now he's gone, and I can't fix it. You're here now, I said. That counts for something. I didn't sell the farm. Instead, I hired a farm manager, a young couple from Carbondale who'd been trying to start their own orchard but couldn't afford land. We worked out a profit-sharing arrangement. They do the physical labor, and I handle the business side and work my library shifts. The first harvest after James died brought in $43,000. I cried when I saw the numbers. The farm could survive. We could survive. Derek comes by about once a month now. Sometimes he brings his kids, and they run through the orchard while he and I drink coffee on the porch. We talk about James mostly, the good memories. It's not perfect. There's still awkwardness, still moments when I can see him calculating property values or Felicia makes a passive-aggressive comment about rustic charm, but it's better. His oldest daughter, a serious 13-year-old named Claire, asked me last month if I'd teach her how to prune apple trees. She said her dad told her that Grandpa James was really good at it and she wanted to learn. I said yes. We spent a Sunday afternoon in the orchard and I showed her how to identify the water sprouts, how to make clean cuts, how to shape the tree for next year's growth. She was a quick learner, careful and precise. Do you miss him? She asked me suddenly, snipping a small branch. Grandpa James? Every day, I said. Dad says you were really brave, fighting for the farm. I looked at her in surprise. He said that? Yeah. She moved to the next branch, examining it critically. He said you taught him something about not assuming you know what's best for people. I'm writing this from my kitchen table, the same table where Derek once told me to pack my things in 30 days. The property deed is framed on the wall now, right next to my wedding photo. My name, legally recorded, Margot Chen, sole owner. It took a quitclaim deed from 2009, a will, a good friend who went to law school at 58, and a willingness to fight when I really wanted to disappear into my grief. But I'm still here. The farm is still here. And this spring, when the apple trees bloomed white and pink and the air smelled like honey, I stood in the orchard at sunrise and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because I won some legal battle, though that mattered, but because I finally understood what James knew all along. This land wasn't about ownership or inheritance or property values. It was about roots, about choosing every day to stay, to grow, to make something beautiful in the soil you're given. The Holloway family had 4 generations here. Now it has 5, and I'm just getting started.